At the time, John Lennon and Yoko Ono were just getting married when they decided to spend a week in bed in the presidential suite at the Amsterdam Hilton. This was 55 years ago. They had sent out a card a few days earlier that read, "Come to John and Yoko's honeymoon, a bed-in, Amsterdam Hotel in Amsterdam." They would sit up in bed and give interviews every day, and they would open the doors to their bedrooms to hundreds of journalists and television teams. When it came to honeymoons, it was unusually full of people here. Our conversation was with the press. We met people from the communist countries, people from the West, people from every country in the world, John recounted. We met people from those countries. We allowed the press to ask any question they desired regarding our position for a total of 8 hours each and every day, during each and every waking hour and every day. This bed-in for the duration of their honeymoon, which lasted for a week, was a form of their campaign for world peace. It's probably the best suggestion we've got up to this point. John stated that rather than running an advertising for war, we will be putting a commercial for peace on the front pages of newspapers all around the world. We are attempting to sell peace as if it were a product, and we are selling it in the same way that people sell soap or soft drinks. They were confronted with inquisitive inquiries on their pacifist stance by some of their more demanding guests, and some of their responses were exceptionally insensitive and self-centered. "I would have gone to bed with him," Yoko said in response to a reporter's question about how she would have coped with the threat posed by Hitler. 10 days from now, I would have convinced him to reconsider his mind." Not everyone was persuaded by the argument. Even some of the Beatles' most devoted followers were skeptical about the band's claims. In his impressive book titled The Beatles, Revolution in the Head, Ian MacDonald noted that under the ostensibly selfless holy foolery was a core of exhibitionistic self-promotion. The Vietnam War would continue to run for another 6 years, despite the efforts that John and Yoko undertook while they were in bed. In spite of the challenges she has faced, Yoko Ono is unwavering in her belief that the two of them have brought about positive change in the world. Her statement that she and John were the only two individuals in the world who spoke for peace at the time was a stunning brag that she made in an interview with Tom Hibbert in the year 1988. "In the beginning, John and I were both pretty alone in what we were saying, we were the only ones. However, I believe that now, 98% of the globe is actually for peace." Ultimately, as you can see, it did have an impact on the situation. During the meeting that took place between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev in the previous year, I had the impression that John and I did make an impact. I was thinking to John, we did it, and I was repeating it to myself. Yoko Ono is currently 91 years old and the subject of a commemorative show at Tate Modern. Over the course of 55 years, she has reached this age. In their haste to laud her genius, the critics have inundated each other with praise and praised her for her accomplishments. Alan Bennett made the comment that if you live to be 90 years old in England and are still able to eat a hard-boiled egg, people will believe that you are deserving of the Nobel Prize. As all is going on, the person who murdered her husband, Mark Chapman, is still being held captive in a prison in the state of New York. 44 years have passed since he was first sentenced to prison. Yoko Ono gives her attorneys instructions to oppose his parole application every 2 years, and he is eligible for parole every 2 years. "Myself and John's 2 sons would not feel safe for the rest of our lives," she says, and people who are in positions of high visibility and outspokenness like John would also feel unsafe. "If Chapman were to be released," she says, "we would not feel safe with ourselves." Her statement continues by stating that the assassination of John Lennon managed to change my entire life, devastate his sons, and bring profound sorrow and fear to the world. Chapman was denied parole for the 13th time earlier this month. It is now certain that he will pass away while incarcerated. Those who believe that Chapman's actions are inexcusable and that it is only fair that he should spend the rest of his life in prison are, of course, going to be vocal about their opinion. This is an instinctive response that people have. Yoko Ono, on the other hand, has devoted her entire life to encouraging others to follow the path of love and peace, as well as to openly preaching forgiveness. In the pursuit of peace, ordinary people in Northern Ireland and South Africa have found a way to forgive their adversaries, despite the fact that they have inflicted tremendous losses on their families. With the lyrics "Love is the Answer," John Lennon sung on the album Mind Games. Yoko Ono has been preaching for a long time, but isn't it time that she put her words into action? John Lennon was shot on December 8, 1980, shocking the entire globe. Nearly unbelievable, it seemed. In order to follow out his plan, Chapman flew from Hawaii to New York. Chapman wanted Lennon to sign an album for him just hours before shooting him 5 times in the back. "He treated me extremely nicely," Chapman said at a parole hearing. "He was patient with me and ironically quite kind. He took his time with me and got the pen going before signing my album, even though the limousine and his wife were already waiting." Sadly, Lennon's celebrity triggered a volatile response in 25-year-old Mark David Chapman. For whatever psychiatric reason, Chapman believed that John Lennon's burgeoning star was in direct opposition to his own relative obscurity in the public eye. He made the decision to act on his harmful beliefs that day in 1980. Chapman didn't attempt to flee the scene and eventually entered a guilty plea. Years later, he would apologize for the incident, but no admission of guilt was enough to win over the Beatles supporters to Chapman's side.